Good morning. Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. I know it's been so long since we've seen you guys. A whole 24 hours have gone. Ari, look, how you doing? We are literally about 1 month away from the beginning of March Madness, one of my favorite times of the year where we have games from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. If you're living on the West Coast, just a day full of games just a month away. How you doing?
Yeah, to me and to many, I think it's the best time of the year is March Madness. We're kind of closing down, conference play these next couple of weeks, and then we head, into conference tournament time, kind of first week of March or so, second week of March, and then we get the selection show, and then we get right into the big dance, March Madness. Obviously, a lot this year has been so crazy. It seems like either every week or every other week we have a new number one team because teams just keep going down, on the road. Big top 25, top 10 matchup. So definitely should be leading into another, kind of unpredictable year, March Madness, where we could see, some teams make a run that are, more so unexpected than others.
You're exactly right. I feel like we always say this every year, the unpredictability with March Madness and, just the unpredictability with college basketball throughout the regular season. And we always say that it gets crazier, but I feel like this is one of the craziest years. You're right, especially with the top 25. Let's get right into it. It seems like we always have a new number one, and now we have another one. And no, college football fans, this is not a joke. Alabama is the number one team in the country right now. They are led by Brandon Miller, the star freshman. Look, he gets buckets, right? He is pretty much one of the main reasons why this Alabama team is as good as they are. They're definitely a number one seed. They've kind of been a number one seed all year long. Despite their fluke loss a couple weeks ago to Oklahoma, this team plays great. They have a big game tonight on the road. I believe pretty much the game of the season for them against Tennessee, against one of the best defensive teams in the country. So this is definitely a must watch for all March Madness fans. I'd say put this on at 4 p.m. Pacific time tonight because Tennessee has always been a number one seed as well. They're number 10 in the country right now, and I feel like they play one of the top defenses in the country, but their offense is so up and down. That's why they've dropped because they've lost literally on buzzer beaters, and that's just the luck of the game. But this Alabama team is going to be tested tonight. But I'm definitely excited to say that this is definitely the number one team in the country just because of how they've played in a tough SEC conference, that is loaded with guys with teams like Tennessee. Even though they're having a down year, Kentucky, obviously with Calipari, Texas A&M's having a good year. Arkansas, even though they're slipping, I know they have what it takes to make a deep run. So Alabama right now, number one team in the country. They're followed by Houston, number two out of the American Conference, who will be moving into the Big 12 next year. The Big 12 is going to be one scary conference next year. I'll tell you that much. Then followed by Purdue, who have they lost, I believe, on Sunday to Northwestern. And, here are the full rankings. UCLA of 4. We have Kansas of 5, followed by Texas, some 2 Big 12 teams right there, back-to-back. First ACC team in Virginia. And then we see Arizona, the other Pac-12 school, in the top 10. And then Baylor and Tennessee to round out the top 10. And then followed by Marquette, Kansas State, Gonzaga, who's been slipping, but now kind of finding themselves after back-to-back wins. Followed by Indiana, who has pretty much surged as one of the best teams in the Big Ten as of late. Miami, a great second candidate for the ACC. And then you have Xavier, St. Mary's, Creighton, who has played their best basketball all year as of recently, followed by Iowa State, UConn, and then to round out the top 25, you have San Diego State, TCU, NC State, Providence, and those Owls of Florida Atlantic. They're having a fantastic year out of the CUSA conference. They've pretty much almost ran this conference. Only 2 losses on the year, total, one of them coming in the conference and one of them coming to an Ole Miss team on the road by 13. So what a great year for the Owls. I believe they'll be a sneaky 7, and that you need to watch out for them. All right, look, when you look at this top 25 recently, right, you see Alabama at the number 1. And no, it's not college football. This is college basketball. Bama number 1. You have a good Houston team. You get to see your Arizona Wildcats at number 8 after a bad loss to Stanford on the road, where Tubelis, as I believe you were telling me on Saturday, was just pretty much in foul trouble the whole entire game. But that's just the nature of college basketball, the unpredictability. But when you look at this 25, what are your kind of outlooks? Do you have any surprises, any bones to pick with the committee in terms of who they've picked for this week? And what do you like about this top 10? Or do you see any potential championship team in that top 10 right now? Or is it somewhere down maybe near the bottom of the top 25?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what stands out the most, not just, in this top 25, but kind of in general, just kind of the volatility of a lot of these teams because, you have a team like Alabama at number 1 who, at their best is the best team in the country, but they rely so much on the deep ball quite often to where if they have a game where they're not shooting well, then they're, then they could drop to any team, come March Madness. And then you have teams like, Houston and Tennessee. Tennessee just won, or before the top 5 team, and teams like that who struggle offensively, have really good defenses, but if they can't score, 60, 65 points, then they could struggle against a team who catches fire, in a March Madness, win or go home any given game. So I think that's part of, what makes March Madness as fun and as thrilling as it is every year. Just the one game, and, one game you can catch fire, one game you can be ice cold all game, and you could lose to a team that you're going to beat 9 out of 10 times. And then that one time, you catch them on the wrong day. So, I mean, I think we're going to continue to see a lot of changes in the top 25 these last couple of weeks of the regular season. You mentioned the Alabama-Tennessee game tonight in Tennessee, and I believe Tennessee's up to like a 3.5-point favorite. So the books think that Tennessee's going to pull off the upset. So that's going to be another change at number 1, come next week if Tennessee does pull it out. So I think it's just all about, and they always say it's tough to win on the road, especially in a tough environment. Like a lot of these top 25 schools have. So, you have schools like Iowa State that have really fallen. They've fallen 8 spots since last week in the top 25. You had not in the top 25, but a school, it was New Mexico, I believe, that was like the last undefeated team in the country. And then now they lost to like a 7-17. I think they were a Wyoming team last night. So, we talked about the mid-majors. You still have FAU there at 25. And then you still have, the other receiving votes that just missed the top 25. You have Oral Roberts, College of Charleston that was up to I think in the 20 to 25 range, and they're still kind of in the conversation, at least to the top 25. So, yeah, I mean, all in all, like you've been saying, it should be, we say it every year where it should be unpredictable, March Madness and all of that. But I feel like this year, more than any recent year, we've seen more changes in the top, not just top 25, but top 5, top 10, and, everywhere, kind of at the top of college basketball.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I feel like this is going to be a little bit unpredictable. You look at the top 5 teams in the poll, right? And you can honestly make a case for any one of those 5 teams to win it all. I mean, for Alabama, if they can hit the deep 3 well, and if their offense is clicking, then they're a national championship team. Houston has one of the best defenses in the country paired with a good offense. They can win it. Purdue feeds Zach Edey so much. The way that they've been playing, they're a good team. UCLA's defensive efficiency has been number 1 in the Pac-12 throughout the past, I think 5 or 6 games. They have a good chance. Kansas won it last year. Who says they can't do it this year? They have a good chance. I feel like there are so many good teams that have a solid chance to make it. And then you talk about teams that are getting ice cold right now. And New Mexico, they were such a great team, and they had a great story with Richard Pitino, and how they were started out undefeated, and they were 13-0 on the season, and then all of a sudden They're under 500 in their own conference. They had a really bad loss to a last place Wyoming team at home. And I feel like that was kind of the nail in the coffin to what was such a great start to the season now is turning cold. And I feel like if this Lobos team wants to make it to March Madness, I feel like they either have to go on an incredible run either in their own conference tournament, which I believe starts in a couple weeks, or just flat out win it all, because you're not gonna get any of these hand-me's if you're losing to quad four teams who you should be beating at home comfortably. You're losing by I believe I don't even know what the score was last night. It was bad. Oh yeah, it was by 14, by double digits to a 8-17 team. That I feel like that's just ridiculous. And then you have this Utah State team, right? That's been a little bit disrespected, but they're over 500 in their conference. They're 20-7 on the year. I feel like they are playing themselves into the tournament. So, the New Mexico fall off is turning into the surgence of Utah State now. And then you mentioned Charleston, who is still very dominant in their conference right now. They're tied for first place in the Colonial. I believe they're like 20. Yeah, they're 25-3. The 3 losses on the year come to 2 of which in the conference, and then 1 to a good UNC team on the road when they were the number 1 team in the country by only 16. But that was a different UNC team at the time anyway. Speaking of a team that's falling off, UNC. I mean, that's another team that has pretty much spiraled in the wrong direction. They're 16-10. I believe that they are playing themselves out of the tournament with these easy hand-me wins that they could be getting in the ACC. I mean, they had a great opportunity Monday at home against a ranked Miami team, and they fell short. And then they pick up 2 big. They lose back-to-back against Duke and Wake Forest. Horrible losses, right? First to a Duke team. Now, obviously, that's the rival game, and there's a little bit of added pressure for that. And then you lose to a good Wake Forest team on the road where your offense isn't clicking. That's another bad loss. And then you beat Clemson. That's a big win, but then you lose to Miami. And so I've been looking at your schedule, right? You got to play a good NC State team on the road. That's going to be another loss. And then after that, obviously Notre Dame having a bad year. And then you got to play Virginia, which is a great team. And then Florida State, obviously, which is a bad year. And then you got to play Duke. So, I can definitely see 3 losses in there for this UNC team. So, and I don't know if you've heard I've heard these crazy rumors. I don't know if you've heard of them with this whole scandal between RJ Davis and Caleb Love, with Caleb Love cheating on RJ Davis's cheating with RJ Davis's girlfriend and all this nonsense. And now that it's coming to the forefront, that's maybe a speculation that the team chemistry isn't there in the backcourt. So that's maybe a reason as to why UNC is having another down year. But who knows? You look at this top 25, pretty much a month out, and you kind of get a good look of who is trending in the right direction, who's trending in the wrong direction. You mentioned in some of the mid-majors, you have Gonzaga. They started out a little cold, but they've picked up back-to-back wins, so they're trending up in the right direction. And then you have a team like FAU, who is still very consistent. You have a team like Charleston, Oral Roberts, for example. They're one of the scariest mid-majors with Max Abmas, who is shooting the ball electric. They're running the table in that Summit League. So, we're getting closer and closer to tournament time. I think there's conference tournaments starting as early as like February 27th. So literally less than 12 days away from the beginning of, tournament time. One of my favorite times of the year, seeing some of these, mid-majors find a winner, whether it's a conference like the MEAC or the SWAC, we'll find a winner there. Someone's got to win, right? But now that we are about a month out, we're going to take a look at the latest bracketology. This is by ESPN's Joe Lunardi. He does a usual breakdown of, as he gets closer to the tournament, he does a lot more of this bracketology. So this is updated as of yesterday, I believe yesterday morning. So this did not take into account New Mexico's loss, but I'm assuming now that New Mexico did lose, I believe they're going to be moving out, and Oregon would probably be the one team moving in. And so you see right there in your final, pretty much if you take a look here, the 16 teams that are on the bubble. You have a West Virginia team who has played very good in a tough conference, but the more losses that add up, that's not going to be good for your resume, in that last four bye area. But you pair them up with Auburn, who has had a little bit of a down year in the SEC, and then Boise State, who has pretty much been one of the more consistent teams in the Mountain West, and then Memphis, obviously the second best team in that American Conference behind Houston, which is pretty much a two-team bid league, honestly. And then the last four teams in, you have Mississippi State, who is pretty much kind of saving their season right now in the SEC. They've won a bunch of recent games, still under 500 within their own conference, but they beat up LSU and Arkansas back-to-back games alongside beating Mizzou. So three big wins and then they got to play Kentucky, another border team, as we look in the first four out. So that game tonight's going to be very big in that border battle between Kentucky and Mississippi State. We already talked about UNC and New Mexico, and then the final team in right now is Clemson. Clemson, obviously, they didn't really expect to be over here. The Tigers, they had a great start. They were looking like the AQ out of the ACC just because of their best record, and then they've been losing recently, and so now they've lost the number one, the best record in the ACC to Virginia. And then you look at the first four out, and you see Kentucky, who is having a really bad year, obviously just disappointing. There's been rumors of Calipari going to Texas and taking his job. Then Oregon, obviously, somehow the Ducks are in this conversation. Personally, I don't believe the Ducks should be one of the first teams out. I just don't really see who they've beaten that qualifies them to be in this realm. I mean, when you look at Oregon's schedule, right, they've played some decent games. I mean, they were ranked at the beginning, and then they just started losing at the beginning of the season. It looked like their season was going downhill, and then conference play started, and then they started picking up some big wins. They had that big win against Arizona at home, and I feel like that's kind of the only thing really clinging on for them because they got beat down by Stanford, which is a bad loss. And then they bounce back. They beat Utah. Then they lose to Arizona on the road, so that kind of crosses it out. And then somehow they beat USC, and so now they're back on the bubble again. And I feel like their bubble is about to burst. I really think so. I don't know if they can really hold on to this just because of their schedule coming up. They got to go play UW today, and obviously their Oregon is a 5.5-point favorite, but the Huskies will give them trouble up in Seattle. So, I feel like that could definitely be something to watch out for. And then they got to go to Pullman to play the Cougs on Sunday. And I believe that the Cougs, last time they did play, Cougs dropped 90 on them in Pullman last year. So who knows what's to say that. And that was on Senior Day. And ironically, the Cougs are playing Oregon on Senior Day. So I don't know what to tell you there. And then you see USC, they've been around the bubble a lot recently after, that big win against UCLA where, they looked so good and, they were looking one of the best teams. And then, they have two bad losses to Oregon and Oregon State. And now they're sitting on the outside of the bubble looking in. And then you have Wisconsin, who had a big win against Michigan last night. They're trying to pull themselves back into it and save their season. And then the next four out, look, Charleston, ignore Charleston, okay? Charleston is making the tournament. They're going to win their conference tournament. I don't know why Lenardi has them as an at-large bid right now. I feel like they're going to win their tournament, even though they've had a couple losses. Those two losses, they shot under 25% from three. That's not going to happen every day. So I feel like Charleston's going to win the tournament, so you can bump out Charleston. And then you have Arizona State, Seton Hall, and Utah. And, it's crazy. You have four Pac-12 teams on the outside. Look at that. You have four Pac-12 teams out on the outside looking in. I was about to ask you, Ari, when you look at these, 15, but 16 bubble teams, what is really standing out to you as we look at the teams that are on the bubble in terms of the last four buys, the last four in, the first four out, and the teams that are, climbing up on the next four out range?
Yeah, I mean, I think the teams that stand out the most are, the Blue Bloods, UNC and Kentucky. And I feel like part of UNC being even in the last four in is part of, I don't know. I feel like it's part of just their name brand of just being North Carolina and them, always being historically, up prior to this year being, top 5, top 10 team. So I think that they're, even though they're the last four in right now, they're going to have to win, several more games and probably even win a game or two in the conference tournament. I think to hang in there, unless they just make it, last four in just off their name. And then Kentucky, and it's just the fall of Kentucky, UNC. I mean, Duke's in the tournament, but the fall of the blue bloods that we're used to seeing as the consistent top 5, top 10 teams. I think it's cool to see new teams kind of rise to the top in that regard. And then you kind of talked about the 4 Pac-12 teams, and we kind of say a lot, or people say a lot, that it's like a conference where teams kind of beat each other up in conference play, and to where you can't have 4 or 5 teams make it when everyone's losing to each other and getting upset to each other and all of that. So I think we're going to see at least 1 or 2 of these 4 teams kind of sneak their way into the tournament, whether that's winning out the rest of the regular season or I don't see a team not named Arizona or UCLA winning the actual conference tournament, but I mean even winning a game or 2 in the conference tournament and then winning out the rest of the regular season could be enough to, find their way into, a last 4 in spot, if you want to say, in the tournament. We talked about Auburn and they're kind of, a down season overall for them compared to standards. And then we talked about New Mexico and their fall, and I think Mexico's going to have to win their conference tournament again. I don't know if they're going to get an at-large bid kind of, in there. They might if they win out in the regular season, but I'm not completely sure. And then, like you said with Charleston, they should win their conference tournament, so they'll get an automatic bid, into the tournament. So, yeah, I mean, obviously we're seeing a lot more bigger name schools this late in the season on the bubble than I think what we're usually used to.
Yeah, you look at the outside of the bubble and you talk about how the Pac-12, this conference always cannibalizes itself. And when we say that, it means that these teams always beat each other up, and it happens every single year. You have, an Oregon team that looks good, and they have a big win against Arizona, but then they have a bad loss to Stanford. And then USC, they go on and beat UCLA, and then they lose to Oregon State. And then same thing for Arizona State, and then Utah. It's always weird how much the Pac-12 conference always just beats each other up. And, it's not like an SEC or like a Big 12 where there are these teams who are beating each other up, yes, but these teams are already good. So it's not like they already are trying to or have bad losses to bottom teams in the conference. They just keep consistently beating, the people in front of them. And that's why you always say, like, this year the Big 12 is the best conference in basketball by far. And next year it's going to be even better with Houston coming in, being one of the most dominant teams in the country. It's going to be madness for the Big 12. And then you see a team like New Mexico, obviously, who was so great at the beginning, who has fallen off because they can't win in their own conference. And that's kind of been the story with like teams like a Wisconsin or a UNC or a West Virginia, teams on this bubble. They looked good, but you can't win in your own conference. That's not going to be great for your resume. Like, those are games that you have to play because they're teams that you should be beating in your own conference. And if you can't do that, then you're obviously not going to be a tournament team. So, right now, I'd say the coldest teams on this list are definitely New Mexico, Clemson, UNC, USC after losing to the Oregon schools, and teams that are surging at the right time. I definitely say Memphis and Boise State. I feel like they are going to be playing some of their best basketball. Same as Mississippi State. They're on a 3-game winning streak right now, and no one's really talking about that. Mississippi State, the Bulldogs are having a good year, and I feel like, if they pick up a big win against Kentucky, another border team right there, then I feel like, that's 4 teams, and 3 of them were in the tournament or on the bubble. I feel those are great wins for your program. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what bracketology is looking like in a week because, anything could happen over the weekend and in terms of just the movement on the lines and all that stuff. So now moving on from the bubble, we're going to take a look at the field of 68. I don't know if you can see it, but going region by region here, we're going to start with the South. And in the South region, number one overall team in the country, obviously, we talked about Alabama. They are the best team in the country. They have a matchup between, whoever's. And then you have an NC State as an 8 seed. Obviously, they're on that 8-9 line. Same for Florida Atlantic. I believe that they're going to be a 9 seed. You have Creighton surging at the right time against a good Liberty team out of the Atlantic Sun. You have Indiana, who's also surging at the right time against VCU out of the 8 Atlantic 10. The A10's having a little bit of a down year. You have an Iowa-Boise State matchup, which could get really, really interesting depending on which Iowa team we're going to be getting. We have Marquette and Hofstra. That's because they believe Hofstra's going to win the CAA, but that's not going to happen. Then Northwestern, who had that big win against Purdue just a few days ago, facing a Auburn team that is kind of cold right now. And then finding out this region, you have Baylor and Vermont. Ari, when we look at this region right here, just in particular, do you see anything you like, anything you don't like, first glance off of the South region?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have Alabama number one. I think in terms of the team that just kind of looking at how they're matching up, I think a Creighton Indiana matchup would be fun in the second round in this bracket. I mean, obviously Auburn isn't having the best season, but I mean they could easily, I think they could easily beat Northwestern and potentially. I mean, Baylor's been playing better as of late, but I think Auburn, that could be a path. Out of all the 2 seeds or possible 2 seeds that they could play, I think Auburn could give them a run in the second round against Baylor if that was to play out. Like you said, Iowa, Boise State could be a fun first round matchup, and the Big East, Marquette. You have a lot of teams that are it's kind of like the Pac-12 where you have a lot of teams kind of beating each other up to an extent. And so I think it is possible that the winner of Iowa Boise State could give Marquette some trouble in the second round. So I don't know, kind of overall, I'm kind of seeing a lot of mid to lower seeds that I think could make a run to, the second weekend, let's just say, in this, South region.
Yeah, when I'm looking at the South region, I am liking potential Creighton, Indiana. Hell, I'm even liking a Creighton, Alabama Sweet 16, if that's a possibility. That could definitely be an electric matchup, 2 highly offensive teams, battling in the Sweet 16 potentially. You talk about Baylor and, if they have a good path, I feel like they could definitely make it all the way to the Elite 8, maybe Final 4 out of that region. We move on across the board. We are moving on. I don't know what region that is. That is the Midwest, excuse me. Number one, obviously, Purdue. They are one of the best teams out of the Big Ten right now, more consistent. They're playing some nobodies. We have Oklahoma State, who has been surging out of the Big 12, playing a cold Arkansas team. Miami versus Southern Mississippi. That Southern Mississippi team is very dangerous. That could be a very fun game to watch in the first round. We have Xavier, first year under Archie Miller against Utah Valley. That could definitely be fun to watch. We have Rutgers. Obviously, New Mexico is, probably going to be out, so maybe sub them in for like Oregon. Rutgers versus either Clemson or Oregon. That could be fun. Tennessee versus Furman. San Diego State versus Texas A&M, and this Texas A&M team has been playing really great recently. And then finishing off with Texas and UNC Asheville. Ari, same question for this region. What do you like out of the Midwest?
Yeah, I mean, Miami's been, really, really good this year, but I agree that Southern Miss could, we always, every year people talk about, the 12-5 upset and how there's at least, 1 or 2 every year. So, this is a possibility. I feel like Miami wouldn't be a huge favorite odds-wise if these 2 teams were to match up. Assuming Southern Miss kind of finishes the season how they've been playing for most of the year. One of the storylines I'm kind of looking at when the bracket is released is to see if they put Arizona and Xavier in the same region because, the storyline of Sean Miller hitting his former team. Obviously, that's not the case here, but, that's what with Xavier, that's what I'm looking at to see once they put the actual – because a lot of people are thinking that they're going to have like a Sweet 16 type of matchup between those 2 teams potentially. I think it would be in Vegas, so it's close to Arizona. But yeah, I mean, Rutgers had a bad loss yesterday at home to was Nebraska, I think it was.
Yeah.
So they'll probably drop maybe a seed or something, but defensively they've been really good, but they've been really good at home. Away from home, they haven't been as good. So I think that they could be a 6 or 7 team to lose to a 10 or 11 seed potentially in the first round, away from home. And then yeah, like you said, A&M is trending upward, and so this could be a fun second round match between Texas and Texas A&M, between the two Texas schools.
Yeah, you look at. Sorry, I completely forgot. I thought it was Archie Miller, not Sean Miller. Archie Miller is in Rhode Island, but yeah, that's a big storyline of Arizona and Xavier are in the same region. That matchup could be a little bit of personal animosity for Sean Miller, obviously, after being replaced by Tommy Lloyd. But we always talk about the 5-12 seeds, and even though Miami is playing great basketball this year, Southern Mississippi is also really playing great, 23-4, one of the best records in their conference, I believe. Just dominant. I believe they're in the Sun Belt this year, so just a great year for them after they moved. So very dominant year. You mentioned this A&M team, and you mentioned San Diego State, how they're not great when they're on the road, but they're great when they're at home. And now that they're going to be potentially playing in in the neutral site, and this A&M team has been playing well, that could be a 10-7 upset, setting up a great Texas A&M Texas rivalry that could happen in the second round. Excuse me. That good SEC Big 12 rivalry, that was always one of the biggest rivalries in football. It can be translated to basketball, so that'd be fun to watch in that region. Moving down to the West region here, and obviously this region is led by Houston right now. They're the number one. They're one of the best teams in the country, and they definitely earned the number 1 seed. They're playing Texas A&M Corpus Christi in the first round right now. Providence Duke, that could be a fun matchup, even though both teams. Even though Providence got a big win last night against a good Creighton team, Providence, they're trending in the wrong direction. After a bad loss this past weekend. I forgot who they lost to.
St. John's.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, they lost to St. John's. Yeah, that was a bad loss. And then Duke, obviously, they've had a big up and down season, but that would definitely be a spicy first round matchup between these two schools. Illinois and Oral Roberts, we talked about Oral Roberts, definitely one of the scarier 12 seeds. That could be a 5-12 upset I'd like to pick as well, especially with Illinois, who had a bad loss to Penn State last night. And Penn State has always had their number, so who's to say Oral Roberts doesn't? Iowa State and Drake. Iowa State, they've been playing not their greatest basketball recently, but a good Drake team out of the Missouri Valley could potentially give them some trouble too. St. Mary's for either Mississippi State or UNC. The St. Mary's team is really good, and they're actually for real this year. And I feel like whoever they play in the first round, I feel like they have a really good shot just because of Ada Mahoney, their lead guard, who is a candidate for one of the players of the year out of the West Coast Conference. Having a fantastic year. And this St. Mary's program did not take a step down after their impressive finish last year. And that could be a fun matchup between either Mississippi State or UNC. We look at K-State K-State versus UC Santa Barbara, Michigan State, Nevada, and then finally finishing out the West Coast region, UCLA and Eastern Washington. Ari, same question here. What do you like from the West region?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier with Houston and how they're kind of vulnerable because they have one of the best defenses in the country, but their offense kind of can let them down certain nights. And so, looking at them, I think that no matter who wins between Providence and Duke, that could be a fun second round matchup and a potential upset alert between the winner of Providence Duke against Houston. You talked about St. Mary's and how good they've been all season, especially offensively, and how I could see them making a run to the second weekend, potentially beating a team like Kansas State, in the second round. We talked about Oral Roberts, like you said, in the 12-5. And, Illinois has been super, super up and down this season. So that could be a potential 12-5, another 12-5 potential upset. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a region where we could see kind of a mid to lower seed make a run to Sweet 16, Elite Eight, kind of deep into this region.
Yeah, you mentioned the vulnerability of Houston, and just because of how, if their offense is not clicking in a very defensive game, they could lose, and I definitely agree with you there. Excuse me. I feel like, a Providence or Duke, whoever wins out that first round matchup, could give Houston trouble in the second round. We talk about Oral Roberts and how they've been one of the more consistent teams all year, and they could give Illinois some trouble in the first round. St. Mary's, they can get on a deep run. And who's to say K-State can not get on a deep run too, depending on where their path is. But right now, I would definitely say UCLA is one of the favorites to get out of this region as well. That Michigan State Nevada matchup in the first round is going to be very exciting to see. A good veteran team led by Tom Izzo against a newcomer in Nevada who has been surging recently, and they have one of the best 3-point shooting. Oh no, that's Utah State. Never mind. One of just a great team that wins a lot of close games, especially at home when they beat New Mexico and they had a good win against San Diego State. So that's going to be that's an intriguing conference. Who I don't even know who's going to come out of that region personally. And then finally, we move to the East. This is the New York region, and then we have number 1 seed Kansas, obviously one of the better teams in the country. It's probably between Kansas and UCLA right now, fighting for that final number 1 seed slot, just depending on the seeding, along with Texas as well. They're playing Milwaukee in the first round. We have Maryland and Pitt. That should be a fun matchup in the first round. Two former really just dominant teams in their own conferences. UConn, who has been really slipping as of recently, they had a great start, and then in the conference they just not been winning a bunch of games. They have Kent State in the first round. You have the Zags, Gonzaga. There they are, matched up with Yale as a 13. We have TCU playing Memphis in the first round, and that could be really interesting. Two really different styles of how they really approach the game and how they play college basketball. And then Virginia and Colgate, Mizzou and West Virginia, which I believe would be a really, really fun matchup in the first round. And then Arizona facing Rider. And Ari, final region, here we go. What do you like from the East region so far?
Yeah, one of the more interesting teams I'm looking at to see where they're kind of seated is Gonzaga, because obviously they have the name value and all that, but this year they have been, they've been a little bit better recently, but they've been kind of not up to their standards like they usually are. But I think it would be it would be a Sweet 16 to see them play Kansas if they were to beat Yale and then beat the winner of UConn and Kent State, which that's another 12-5, potential upset as Kent State over UConn, who, like you said, has been slumping. Looking at Arizona, I like this kind of where they're at in this bottom group here. It would be fun to see a rematch against TCU, who they had one of the more controversial games last year in the NCAA tournament. That went to overtime between Arizona and TCU, and it was the round of 32, I believe, last year. So that would be fun to see a rematch between those two teams. If TCU is fully healthy, they could easily beat, Memphis, obviously, and then Virginia in the second round. So that could be, a Sweet 16 rematch between Arizona and TCU. I think, like I said, I think those are two Sweet 16 matches that could be fun. Is Kansas, Gonzaga in the top part of this region, and then TCU, Arizona in the bottom part of the region.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I feel like even though, yes, Gonzaga and their name value and what Mark Few has done for that program is so impactful, this year is considered a down year for them. They've had a couple bad losses in the conference to an LMU team where their home winning streak got snapped, and then they had a bad road loss where their offense just wasn't finding itself against St. Mary's, and this is a down year. This is kind of like the 2018 year for this Gonzaga team, where they were good, but not, I don't think, good enough to be considered as one of the top 10 teams in the country. and I feel like that's a continuation into this year. And then that would be a great Sweet 16, as you said, between Kansas and Gonzaga. Two historic programs, Bill Self versus Mark Few. These two teams definitely can get at each other. And then you talk about this TCU team, and this TCU team is good, and we always say that they have potential, but the only thing holding them back is really themselves. And you mentioned it just with their injuries and how injured they get. I feel like they fully healthy, they can make a run, and I agree. I feel like that would be a spicy Sweet 16 between TCU and Arizona once again. And as you just mentioned, we talked about that matchup that happened in the second round last year. Very, very close game back and forth where Arizona barely held on for the win with Matherin really holding him behind his back along with Koloko. I feel like that would be a fun Sweet 16 as well. And then you mentioned this Kent State team, if they get hot, and then UConn, if they start falling off a lot more, who's to say that could be another 12-5 upset in the first round again. But we've covered a lot of college basketball on this episode. I believe that's going to do it for us. Ari, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, yeah. On Friday, we'll be going over everything, NBA ahead of the All-Star break or All-Star weekend. So we'll be going over our predictions for all the, Saturday's events, and then I guess that'll be before we know the teams, right, of the All-Star. So we won't be able to really do that, but we can kind of re-go over, the players. There are some injury replacements, so we can go over, those players and all that. And yeah, we'll go over all that on Friday.
Yeah, like Ari said, we're going to be going over our predictions. Obviously, we now know the full list for the 3-point contest. The rookies competition. They're going to keep doing that format as they did last year between the sophomores, the rookies, and I believe the G League. So we get that competition again, and we also get our 3-point competition. They released all the names that are going to be participating. The exciting dunk contest and all that nonsense. And then obviously Sunday is the All-Star game, obviously with no prior knowledge of who's going to be on teams because they're doing it as the day of. So we won't be able to predict who's going to win.
I think I saw it doing it on Friday. I thought I saw it.
Friday. Oh, maybe they are doing it Friday. I thought it was doing.
Yeah,
I don't know what the format is. I thought they were doing it literally like right before the game started, like on the playground. Like I picked like that kind of style, but I don't know what the draft style is. We'll find out Friday for you. Let's just say that we'll find out Friday. But we're gonna have.
I know you're right. Just before the game, yeah.
I thought that's what I thought. Yeah, it's just before the game starts. So we'll have all that for you Friday. But after a jam-packed episode, that's REM Korea. We thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you guys Friday for our breakdown of All-Star Weekend in Utah. Peace, guys.